What you are currently looking at is today's statistics for my Tier 10 battles. I've played 47 games in total. Out of these 47 battles, I've been able to go 80.85% win rate and average 3,876 damage. Today's video should hopefully teach some of these skills to you, so that you can average more win rate and specifically damage. Now, something I want to point out is that win rate is just as important, if not more important, than average damage. I can't tell you how many players there are out there that will sit at the back of the map, waiting for everybody in front of them to die, to then come in at the last moment, clean up all the kills that you've lowered, and then have more average damage. That is a strategy, but usually when you do that, there's a much higher chance of loss. So I usually like to go for around a 75% win rate on my 30-day stats, paired with around 3,500 damage. I think these are the sweet spot for me, and really any skilled player should be looking for these two criteria, over 70% and around 3,500. But obviously, to get there, you need to learn from your mistakes. You need to know about what vehicles you're driving and map knowledge. Teammates, what vehicles you're going up against. These are all things that I don't think about too much when I'm playing, but obviously resonate in my mind. Watching this 10-15 minute video isn't instantly going to make you a better player, but it should hopefully allow you to learn how I think as a player and how you can adapt these thought processes and map things and all the stuff I talk about in the video in your future battles. And the more and more you learn about your tank and the maps and the positioning and your teams and everything like that, the better and better you can be. Let's start off simple. In today's video, I'll be playing in the VZ55, a fairly average heavy, and I figured picking an average vehicle would be perfect, so I can talk about everything to know. So the first thing you want to do whenever to do well in a vehicle is learn its strengths and weaknesses. Now you can very easily do this before even playing a tank. You just look at its stats, and sure, while it's not going to tell you everything, looking at a vehicle's statistics is enough information to know the general idea it's going to have for a playstyle. For example, the VZ55 has a top speed of 38 and a reverse of 13. Now this vehicle's armor profile is pretty simple. It's got a super strong turret, a weak hatch, an incredibly thick upper plate, and a very weak lower plate. Very bad side armor. So what that means is already this is a hull down type of tank. You want to use that upper plate armor, use the turret, and try to hide the hatch. You don't want to use this vehicle on flat ground if the side armor's not good and the lower plate's weak due to the fact that you're not going to be great at side scraping, and putting yourself in an aggressive position can fail miserably when you take a look again at that 13 kilometers per hour of reverse speed. So that already is a bunch of information to take in and something to keep in mind while using this vehicle. Another thing you should keep in mind is your DPM and how long your reload is compared to other players. Your overall accuracy, knowing how far away you can stay from the front line while still hitting your shots fairly accurate. You want to take a look at your alpha damage, your penetration. This vehicle has 346 millimeters of pen with calibrated shells. That is enough to cut through basically anything. Now there's a lot of people that try to argue, well, you should run rammer because you'll have more damage per minute. And I always say the exact same thing. I average 3,500 on my NA account at any given month with 75% win rate, and that's higher than 99% of other players in the NA server. Even a lot of the top players don't average that much consistently. So at the end of the day, you can run gun rammer, but I still do just as well with calibrated shells, proving that it's not about the DPM, it's about how you work it. So we've talked about the strengths and weaknesses of this vehicle. Obviously, looking at the gun, we can see with the poor DPM, and this being a single shot, but high penetration, this is a very good midline take. You don't want to run it directly in the front line, because if you do, and you need to back out of position and you've over-aggressed, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get either clipped by autoloaders, or you're going to get caught out in the open. As you just saw, we are loading into a game on Mayan ruins. Now, the games you're watching are completely live, and these are not replays. These are actually games that I am playing during the battles. But I figure that after the video is over, which is currently right now, I'm going to put in maps and the overview of maps so you can see my thought process on where I like to drive. So that's what we're doing right now. You're going to see one for Main Ruins, you're going to see one for Middleburg, and you're going to see one for Alpenstadt. So let's start off with Mayan. I'm in my VZ, and I have spawned in right at base 1. My goal is for the majority of the team to go towards base C and above base B. Base B is the worst area to go unless you have to. I highly recommend to avoid at all times going to this pit. Don't capture the base. Don't drive through this area. It's a bad idea for a couple reasons. First of all, let's say you see a couple heavies that are spotted right here, and you think, well, I'm going to get behind them and farm them. Well, here's the problem with that theory. First of all, if the majority of your team is off to this side of the map and you try to get behind them, if you don't have any support, they can just turn around, push you, and you'll die because you'll get stuck in here. But the second reason that problem is terrible is because they can have tank destroyers sitting in this back bush here. They can have a tank destroyer sitting in this back bush here. They can have tanks sitting at the balcony here. They can have vehicles pushing across heavy side here, and they could have vehicles sitting here. They could have a tank pull behind you here. Essentially, if they have even one tank that isn't spotted on their team, even if it's not a tank destroyer, any tank that's not spotted on their team is really dangerous. And if you try making a flanking maneuver, it only takes one vehicle to get behind you to completely destroy your chances of winning. So essentially, just don't drive through B. And that's also the same advice for here. Don't overexpose. I know a lot of players, including skilled players, that like to drive up top this ramp and then try to poke on people hull down here. I don't like to do that anymore. I like to go wide here and then usually get hull down at this spot. This not only is pretty covered from the bridge here, which up top you have to be a little worried about because mediums can shoot you from the little cracks in the rocks, but not only that, but if you overexpose your tank at this position, tank destroyers from back here, here, and here can shoot right into you. So you have to be very careful. So I usually like to go low. Driving a vehicle like the VZ55, I know that I'm not fast enough to get onto the bridge, which would be the ideal situation. And I know that going all the way around wide like this really doesn't make sense because their heavies could get here faster than I'm going to flank all the way around, push on the bridges, and completely box our team in with the help of their mediums here. So you don't ever want to have that happen either. So usually the best decision you can make is if your team is going towards C and overall towards mid, you want to drive your heavy either to this ramp here and wait if you don't have enough support, or if you do, to drive up to this area here and sit hull down. That is really the best way to describe it. And that's about as simple as it gets towards C side and my basic positioning early game. Towards A side, which you're actually going to see this battle, it's a lot trickier. There are no hull down spots in A, unless you want to count this area right here. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to work that because, yeah, the action's going to be over here and here. There's no way you're going to wait at this spawn the entire battle. Now, there is one other hull down spot that you could technically take, which is going through mid, and then cutting through this ramp right here and sitting hull down at this spot. I guess it's okay. If you're in an STB1 and you have 11 degrees of gun depression, that spot can be really nice. But again, the same problems occur going this area that so do going to this area. If there are any tanks here, if there are any tanks that go to medium side and they possibly see you and they sit right up on the stairwell here, they can poke you and shoot you in the rear. And if there's any tanks waiting at this area, you basically are screwed because they're going to get behind you and then you can't do anything. So my basic advice is don't ever go to this middle ramp unless you're forced to. And even then, just don't go to this area. Either go behind the enemy because you know you're not going to get shot there, or go into your spawn this way. But from the positioning that we spawn in at, our team is not going to be too great, and we're going to go over towards heavy side. Now, you got two options on heavy side. You can either go wide all the way towards A, or you can cut through mid. Which option should you take? It depends really on what vehicle you're driving. If you're in a fast heavy, like let's say a T95E6 or an Object 260, an Object 777, and you say, well, my team hasn't spotted much at A, then you can very quickly head to a bush like this right here. If you're a fast enough heavy and you get into this bush, you'll be able to spot anything going down this lane, and you'll give your team and yourself information that is very useful for what you're going to do next. If you're in a slower heavy, like I'm in, a Mouse, an E100, or a VZ55, then it's a lot smarter to go through the mid route. You do got to be a little careful, because there can be tanks crossing here that might shoot you, but usually, and even from my experience, I'm never looking through this alleyway when I'm crossing this way. So usually you can expect to make a slight poke here and try to spot anybody crossing. This again can give your team crucial information, because if you spot tanks going this way, it can then give you the go-ahead to push aggressive here and watch your team collapse in on anybody that might go towards A, and you can very easily pincer them. So that's one of the big advices that I can give. If you're going this route, you do need to be careful from tanks sitting here. You obviously could get shot by a camping tank back there, but it's the same thing for this spot. There can be tanks sitting here, or there can be tanks sitting in the back bush. Now, obviously, when I say all these things, it's identical for the other side of the map. There can be tanks sitting here, and there can be tanks sitting here as well. So always keep that in mind. When I'm talking about one side of the map, these situations are parallel and can be done exactly the same on the other. So I'm going to drive my VZ, as you're going to see in the replay, over towards here. I've got the support of my teammate. We're going to wait right at this corner here. Poke, nothing gets spotted. We wait until our teammates that go wide spot. Then with that information, I'm going to get behind them. And that's essentially my thought process on Mayan Ruins. Usually, you want to learn about what your tank's good at. If I'm in a Boss Shatio 25 ton, I'm not going to go wide here because I know I don't have the gun depression to work it. But if I'm in, let's say, an STB, then I might. It's really dependent on what tanks you're driving and where they can do well. But looking at the enemy lineup, we can see we already have 2 autoloaders, being just M6EOs alone. But then we also have a tier 10 Kron and an FE4005. That alone is an incredibly deadly lineup. So I don't want to go alone anywhere. I want to stick with my team. Now my IS-4 has suggested driving to base A. I personally don't want to go towards A. I want to go to base B, right above it on the little hull down area. However, if my team ends up going towards A, then there's not much of a decision I'm going to be able to make. And this is a good example of where when you're in a tank that doesn't work well on flat ground, what are you going to do if, yeah, I've got weak lower plate and weak side armor, as I said? Well, the first thing is, even if you do have weak side armor, you always know that at a 90-degree angle, nothing's going to pen you. It doesn't matter how weak your armor is, you're always going to get bounces at a 90-degree angle. But usually what I like to do is wait for one of my teammates to get some spots for me. For example, my Yo has decided to drive out into the open first, and because of that, he has now given me some spots. With that information, I see there's an E75 pushing the Yo, I see there's a Kron. I don't want to put myself in the front. Unfortunately, that shell also did not like us. But I don't want to put myself in the front of this impact without support of my teammates, which we can very easily see we do actually have support from. So we got the Kron off to the side, we're going to get a nice pen into the Kron, and then again, we're going to get into a side scraping position, and hopefully, with the help of our Yo, get some bounces here. So I'm going to side scrape, but the Yo is actually going to take the shots. Now, to be fair, I don't really mind my teammates, even if I cause them to bleed. Like, obviously, I knew that backing behind the Yo, the Kron was going to shoot that player. But I also know that I'm a much more important player, and as egotistical as that sounds, don't bleed health for teammates, especially if you can't trust them. I know that sounds mean, and it's true. Like, a lot of times, you will bleed health for a teammate, and then 2 seconds later, they won't kill the person you hope them to, and they end up dying, and you still end up losing the battle. And it is an incredibly frustrating experience that just causes me to get angry. So usually what I like to do is if my teammate wants to play aggressive, I'm going to stay behind them. I'm going to let them take the shots, and until they start backing up, I'm not going to really worry too much about it. Like, again, my Yo is playing incredibly aggressive here, and I'm not going to be the one to take the brunt force impact when the Yo is obviously the one playing stupid aggressive. Now, notice how I took a slight deviation in my driving there to make sure that my entire lower plate was hidden so the 4005 couldn't hit me in the side like he did with the previous shell. That is something I always want to make sure to do, make micro adjustments, maneuver my tank in a proper setting so that I don't get penned. We got the side of the STB, but obviously that doesn't matter too much. He just got absolutely bedoinked out of existence. Even in this battle, a game where I was out of my element, where we didn't have much of an opportunity to farm, we are still at 3,170 damage, and with this pen into the rear of the T-54, as usual, we are able to go over 3,500 damage. That game didn't seem very eventful, and it wasn't. But just some of the simple things I did there and talked about can very easily be brought into play. For example, when I was on heavy side, you notice I waited for my team, and I always stick with my team. Going away from your team is the worst mistake you can make as a skilled player. For example, sometimes on Nube, I'll want to go up the bridge, but I'll notice that only one of my teammates will go up the bridge. And at that point, I've realized, nah, going up the bridge is a failure. Why am I going to go and try to hold something and bleed my valuable health when I could go with the team and hold, have them take some of the shots from me, and work together. Again, this is something that you always got to keep into the back of your mind. On a map like Alpenstadt, it is very dependent on what tank you drive, depending on where you're going to go. Now, obviously, because I'm in a heavy for today's video, we're not going to focus on medium side. We are going to focus on the heavy side. Now, in the VZ, as I've talked about before, it's a hull-down tank. You don't want to drive it on flat ground. You want to avoid that as much as possible. You don't want to side scrape because it's not good at that, and you don't want to fight autoloaders or super heavies that have more alpha because you'll very easily be out-traded. So even though it's very easy to drive my VZ all the way up here and cut through mid and try and work this spot here and then shoot the heavies as they poke, the problem is I'm exposing my lower plate when I do that, and I'm making it very easy for opponents to penetrate me. In that process, I'm also very slow at reversing, so even if I do get an early shot on something that tries to poke this corner, they could very easily shoot me back, possibly track me as autoloaders, make me use repair kits. At the end of the day, it's not a great idea to poke the spot. Okay, well, what else do we have? We could go this way. Again, same exact situation. Actually, it's worse to go towards B. This is one of the worst spots to go. A lot of players go here, and I don't really know why. First of all, medium tanks at this ramp can very easily shoot you if you overpoke the spot to try and shoot tanks in mid. So that's a big L, and it's obviously on this side as well. Medium tanks over here can very easily shoot right into you. So that's the first thing I can say. I don't like poking B because mediums can shoot you. But not only that, if there's heavies here, they can also shoot you when you try to poke this position. So if you ever watch me on replays or literally any gameplay, I'm almost never going to go to B unless it's like a tier 8 battle where I don't think it's going to matter. But apart from that, I usually highly recommend to only go towards middle. If I'm in like an E100 or a super heavy that's very good at side scraping, if I'm in an autoloader that doesn't have a lot of armor like an AMX 50B or a T57 heavy, you will most likely see me driving down this lane here or this lane here, because this is the best spot for me to work my tank, to try and punish somebody that's driving out around this corner. That's the best type of positioning that you can do. But our VZ doesn't have an autoloader, and it doesn't have good armor to work on flat ground. So we have two spots to drive it. It is either in this spot here or in this spot here. Now you could technically go to the comp spot, which is right here, and sit hull down, possibly shoot in a B, but it's kind of useless, I'm going to be real. It features the same weaknesses that I just said about base B over here. If mediums decide to flank you, they can get shells into your rear. And if that's the case, it could fall apart pretty quickly. So usually I don't recommend to go to that spot. These are the two and really only two spots you want to work as a hull down vehicle. Now it's pretty easy to work these positions. You have two options. You can either stay a little bit further back or go aggressive. In the replay you're going to watch, I go aggressive, and honestly, I die because of that. If I had stayed in this further back spot, probably would have lived, probably could have even dealt more damage. But I thought that my team wasn't going to fall apart as fast as they did on this side. Unfortunately, our 50 TP completely pokes, kills himself before we even have the opportunity to get out. At that point, we know we're going to be rushed, which you're going to see, so I'm not going to spoil that for you. But essentially, if you're in a tank that has poor reverse speed, it's usually smarter to stay at this back area. But it only depends on the lineup. If you're up against a lot of tier 9s and you don't think it's going to be as much of a problem, or you're not up against vehicles that you think are going to go far corner and are going to be a super big threat, then play aggressive. Try to get some aggressive ground. As I usually say, if you win the aggressive side of a map, you almost guaranteed win the game. That's usually why my win rate is super high paired with damage, is because I like to take aggressive positioning like this frontline spot rather than sitting back here. You will see a lot of players, and even players like His Royal Fatness, stay a little bit more passive early game. And this is really good if you want to take in knowledge and you want to give yourself some time without bleeding health and get the job done. But for a player like myself, I usually like to take the more aggressive route, just because I think it's better for getting wins, it's better for giving your team a bit more cover, so that's kind of the differences in thought process. Both are equally good, it just depends on your personal playstyle. As useless as teammates can be, at the end of the day, they have hit points, and hit points are valuable, because the more hit points you have in your side means the less that you potentially are going to be bleeding. If I'm driving into the front line, and I have a 50 TP, Type 68, and 50B taking shots for me, I can stay comfortably a little bit further back, penetrate my shells that I need to, making an impact in the battle, and in the process let my teammates make the mistakes, make the aggressive overplays. Now on a map like Alpenstadt, there's not a lot of hull down positions, except the one that we're going to drive to, and this is really the only spot you can drive a tank like the VZ, a Concept 1B, or the majority of vehicles that rely on gun depression. Now looking at the enemy lineup, we can see they have a Yag. Most likely, the Yag would be sitting in that bush right in the back, but as we can see right now, I don't need to worry about that. We've already gotten a bounce on our tank hull down. We got a shell into the edge of the Yo's turret cheek. Just like that, we're doing pretty well. At this point, we do have to be a little careful, but we obviously know that the enemy Yo is on a clip reload. We can see the enemy Waffenträger has made a super aggressive play, and I don't want to be put in a position of weakness for this Waffenträger to shoot us. So we're going to stay hull down right now. And we're going to slowly make our way out of cover, and we're going to see if we can get a shell into the Waffle. He's obviously not looking at us, so we're going to get a free shot, and we're going to back on up. Again, we're staying our tank hidden under cover, and we're making sure that we're not in any exposed weak spots. Now, the WT is a pretty big threat, but at the same time, I'm not all too worried about his vehicle. At this point, we're just going to wait, and there you go, WT pokes. We get a nice HE pen, but unfortunately, we overexpose our hull just by a teeny bit, and because of that, we are actually penned. We can see that our team is not doing the best of jobs in this situation. I have very little support behind me, and that's obviously not what I want in the majority of games I play. So right now, the best thing I can do is keep my hull dug in. And I'm going to try and hold because, yeah, really the only support I had completely fell apart when I needed it. So we're going to get a shell into the side of the 50 TP. The 50 bounced us, which means at this point the Yo is now the biggest threat. So we're going to start turning towards the Yo. We're going to make sure that this player cannot pen us, and we're going to shoot at the Waffle with an HE shell. Now, even though we feature very, very nice HE damage, our HE did end up actually screwing us and not allowing us to finish off the player. Now, at this current point in time, we know that the 50 TP is going to be the tank most likely to finish us off, and with the Waffle no longer looking at us, it would be most likely to try and face hug this Yo to not get ourselves killed. Now, we did get one bounce from the Yo. We got a pen back into him. The problem is right now, I'm most worried about that Waffle shooting me in the rear. Taking a look back at this replay, we can see just what went down. We are obviously trying to shoot this enemy Waffle. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't shoot a high explosive shell into his tank at this point, you'll notice that I barely had enough gun depression to actually shoot his vehicle. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to pen HE on the front part of his hull, so I just fired AP because it was easier and I could guarantee the pen. At this point, we're going to aim in a shell onto the 50 TP, but I'm not able to pen it, so I'm just going to back up, we're going to stay passive, and get a nice shell into the enemy Waffle. The problem is, at this point, our 50 TP has basically killed himself. I didn't think he was going to die that fast, and I was really hoping that his support was going to help us win this flank. But it seems like he really just didn't understand how to use his vehicle, and as you'll notice, got finished off by the Yag. We were literally talking just a moment ago in the actual game about how Yags like to stay at this back spot, either sitting in this bush all the way in the back corner here, or they're usually somewhere around this area. And as we can see, the 50 TP completely overexposed his tank, not only getting shot by the M5 Yo, but the Yag in the process. This is not good, because right now, we knew instantly that we are in a pretty dookie situation. The problem is there's nowhere for me to leave. If we look behind me, where am I going to go? I mean, the only spot I could possibly leave is this way, and yeah, I probably could have, in retrospect, turned my tank and left. But at the same time, it wouldn't have done much. I probably would have gotten shot by the 50 TP, I would have gotten shot by the Waffle, I would have probably been clipped by the Yo, and I probably would have ended up being worse than what I currently am in this situation. So I see the 50 TP put on his tungsten and adrenaline. I don't want to get shot by that, so we get a nice bounce from the 50 TP. At this point, you obviously want to be smart. So I know that the Yo is the next biggest threat. He's fired one shell into us. I'm going to start turning towards him. His intraclip is not fast enough to get the next shell in, so we are able to get a nice bounce. At this point, we're going to shoot the enemy Waffle. We're going to low roll. This is devastating. We needed this shell to pen because it would have been massive. We would not have been penned by the Waffle if this shot had actually average rolled, which unironically would have let us win this situation. But because we get unlucky, that is not the case. So at this point, I know I need to finish off the 50 TP because the Yo fired his last shell into me. He's on reload. So that is exactly what we do. But again, this Waffle, the one who gets away, is just this annoying little rascal. And you can see that he is currently staring at me. And I knew this. So I can't drive any more ahead or this Waffle could possibly shoot me. Now, I didn't know that the Waffle actually couldn't see me from this angle. But obviously, from my point of view, it looks like, and we can actually see this, it looks like that Waffle can see me. So I had no clue. At this point, I am just looking at the Yo, hoping that we can get a bounce. So I drive a little bit up. I don't spot the Waffle. I'm trying to get a bounce, but he shoots me in the hatch. Kudos to him. He knows where my weak spot is. we still do pretty good, 3,657 damage, and end up coming out with a victory. But you can see how I tried to dismantle that situation to the best of my capabilities, dealing with each threat one at a time. Again, as I went over, the HE damage on this vehicle completely let us down. It is 610, the Waffle had less than 600 health, and if that had penned, we easily would have lived throughout that entire situation, and probably even killed the Yo, and been able to live to tell the tale. But as you can see, even as skilled as I am, RNG can be the downfall of any good player. The final battle we are going to be taking a look at is on Middleburg, a very tricky map for beginners to understand. And once again, in today's video, I'll be explaining why going town is not the correct decision. There's a lot of people that always try to argue this in the comments, oh, going town has more bases, and if I'm in a super heavy, I can hold. Yes, technically you can, and you might win battles like that. But at the end of the day, going town is not the correct way if you want to win the majority of your games, support your team, and get the most damage out. We, in this battle you're about to see, are going to go up the hill. And thankfully, the 250 TPs, which I also have on my team in Platoon, are smart enough to go up the hill as well. They're probably pretty decent because they were able to get the vehicle in the clan event, so they know a thing or two about this game. So we all go up this hill. We notice immediately that there are tanks capturing base A, and a Yag has been spotted over here. So that means at least 2 vehicles are down at base A. Already, that means we have a massive advantage up on the hill, with the majority of our heavies and me going up there, plus my mediums. We instantly steamroll the 1-2-1, we kill the 50 TPs, and just like that, it is an instantaneous win. Winning up top the hill on literally any time you play Middleburg, if you win it fast enough, you basically win the entire game, because the enemy is trying to push into B, and it doesn't matter how fast they try to push into B, if you just flank behind, capture A, they're done. So yeah, it's pretty easy to deal with a team. Now, if an entire enemy team goes to town on Middleburg, then it can be a bit harder, but it's still usually not that much of a problem, because you'll have one straggler that goes town, he'll spot them, he'll hold them off, you'll get up top, and then you'll push behind them fast enough. The worst thing you can do on Middleburg is when you see their whole team is going town, is to wait. The longer you wait up top, the more base cap you are allowing them to get. It's just like a comp game. If you allow the enemy to build up enough base cap to where you need to rush in and frantically try to get kills in panic mode, then you're going to lose. But if you see that they are pushing town, then calmly and collectively go wide, go behind them, see if you spot anything while being hauled down at a spot right here. And then if you don't spot anything, then go into base A. You can side scrape here, and you should be fine. At that point, then you've got base C and A captured, and then you can either back off and get hauled down and hold again, or you can continue pushing through. That's usually my advice. When it comes to haul down spots, if you ever do go town on Middleburg, this is literally the only spot. I'm not even joking. I mean, I guess you could count this all the way in the back spawn, but you're not going to camp a heavy there. Literally, this is the only spot you're going to sit haul down on Middleburg. So if I were ever to drive a VZ, that's where you're going to see me if I'm on town. If I'm on actual Middleburg Hill, which is all the way up here, then there's a lot of spots I can work. I can sit back here if I want to be a bit passive. That's if my team is getting absolutely crapped on by the mediums here, and they're over poking, and I can't get into this aggressive spot. Or, if there's a tank in this position, and my team isn't playing aggressive here, I know I can't get there, then I'm going to wait in this spot here. You can also go wide and get to this spot, which is pretty nice. It allows you to shoot tanks that are poking here, and it allows you to sit haul down against vehicles in front of you. The problem with this spot specifically is that, let's say an enemy Kron or Minnow decides to work the opposite position, you're basically going to be spending the rest of your game dealing with a tank you almost cannot pen haul down. It's really annoying, so I usually don't like to go to the wide spot. I personally like to sit here early game, and then if I can move up to this spot, and then sit haul down, and then if I can move up over here, work this hill, try to shoot the tanks in the side at this area, and then after they've been dealt with, I can push around here, and then get haul down and shoot with these vehicles here. You can see how it's a multi-stage process on dealing with the vehicles on Middleburg Hill, and you're basically going to see me do that process in the game we're about to watch. Instead of going low, because my teammate's all the way there, I'm going to go up high, do the same thing. I'm going to shoot at these guys here, wait for the 1-2 on the die, then I'm going to cut across here, I'm going to kill the 92E1, and then I'm going to deal with these guys here. Again, basically the same process. Then I'm going to push straight in the town and help out the rest of the team. So, pretty easy. Let's do one final battle and see if we can do just as well in the VZ. Up against us, we can see platooning 50 TP prototypes. Now, you usually have to expect that these players have some common knowledge of the game if they're in a fairly active clan, completing all their missions, and able to get the vehicle. We can also see there's an E100, YAG, IS-8, there's a lot of heavies. Now, usually, you can expect your team to go town if they're not the most skilled, but it looks like we are having both of our 50 TP prototypes also go up, which is actually really important. At this point, we gotta hope that our Minnow, Conway, and E75 support us, but unfortunately, we can already see that our Minnow is making a fatal flaw of going town. Now, already, you want to use your big brain and realize, look, base A is being captured, and a YAG is spotted down low. This means instantly that we have at least somewhat of an advantage up top, if not everybody on the enemy team is up here. Because right now, we only have one tank that's gone low, being the enemy Minotauro. That means we can very easily push up here. Now, yes, that YAG is a pretty easy shot for me to go for, but I don't know if there's tanks that can spot me, and it's not worth it to go for that player when I can much easier push over here, try to support my team from the enemy 50 TP Protos, and the 1-2-1. We can obviously see the 50 TP Protos are not fully fixated on me right now, so we're going to get a free shot into that tank. We got to weigh our priorities and see what is the deadliest vehicle in front of us. Well, it's definitely the 1-2-1, but it looks like my teammates are making quick mantling or dismantling of that player. So we're going to stay chill. We're going to aim it on the side of the 50 TP. Again, making sure I'm not overexposing my hull, staying calm, staying passive, and we're getting some pretty good clears here. The 1-2-1 is very briefly going to hopefully get shot by our teammates and finished off. We got the enemy 50 TP. Again, overexposing his hull. We're the ones playing passive. We're the ones making sure that we are not bleeding. At this point, we both know that the 50 TPs feature very long reloads, so I'm not too worried about them. We are at a bit of a worry, the T92E1, which you can see I took a quick shot at, but nothing we gotta worry about. Again, we got a bounce from the 50 TP. I'm not gonna use my repair kit because we don't need to. That would be a waste. We get a nice shell into his vehicle for 500 damage, and our teammate finishes him off. We're gonna wait for our reload. Our adrenaline just wore off, and at this point in time, we can just wait right here, and then once we get our shell, get a nice tracking shot, back in the cover. You see how I tracked him when he didn't have enough gun depression to shoot our lower plate. So just like that, very easily, we were once again able to get a pretty nice slapper-rooney into the enemies. So, 478 shot into the rear of the YAG. Our 50 TP is going to shoot him as well, and we're going to take this time to get over towards our opponents. Instead of staring at the YAG and wasting time, I know that it's a lot more beneficial, especially if I want to get out damage if I keep driving towards my opponents, especially because the closer I get, the easier it is to hit my shots. So we get a nice shell into the enemy 100, and at this point, the only player left that I really care about is the IS-8. Using HE and having knowledge of how much pen you have with your high explosive is always something that you should learn to use. Being able to pen that HE there gave us a bit more damage at the end game scenario than we would have if we had fired AP. So, again, using good map knowledge, knowing where our tank works well haul down, and knowing who the threats are, we've been able to put our tank in a very solid situation, dealing 3,700 damage and 880 blocked. Overall, we had a pretty solid run. The only game I didn't show you guys was the battle rate before this on Dead Rail. I did 3,600, and I just thought it was a really boring game because Dead Rail sucks as a map, so I didn't really bother to go over it. But the other 3 games, all very easy. We've won every battle I've played in the VZ for today's video, and it very easily showcases the capabilities of this tank and how to think like a pro.